KEMI Badenoch, leader of the opposition, is no fan of identity politics, but she has already made history as the first black woman to be leader of a major British political party. And in her view, she is just getting started.
This is a question about moral courage, Mr. Speaker, about doing the right thing even when it is difficult. And the truth is, he doesn't have the balls.
Born in London but raised in Nigeria, she came back here as a precocious 16-year-old, flipped burgers in McDonald's and realised that she was deeply conservative.
Free speech matters. Some cultures are better than others, and it's only contentious to say this because honesty has become impossible.
Her task today of reviving a bruised Conservative Party in an era of national populism and economic anxiety has been made harder by the rise of reform. She says that she needs time and a fair hearing. So that, and some tough questions about her record and her character, is what she's about to get.
Here she is.
Hello.
The Right Honourable Miss Badenoch, welcome.
Thank you, Alan.
How are you?
Very well.
Take a seat, please. KEMI Badenoch. You've been leader of the Conservative Party for well over 6 months now. How's it going?
It is going well, but this was never going to be an easy job. I knew when I was taking on this role that it was going to be the most difficult thing I ever had to do. Opposition is difficult, but opposition after a historic defeat, immensely difficult. The public are not interested in a party that they've just removed from office. So what I'm doing right now is trying to make sure we get a lot of the foundations of things fixed, making sure that we don't run out of money. So fundraising, that's been going very well, making sure we have a proper campaign machine. But the real thing that I need to do is to make sure people know what the Conservative Party is about. And that's a real challenge. We've gone through multiple iterations. A lot of people thought we weren't Conservative anymore. So my job now is to make sure that people can see that we are the only party on the centre-right. There are pretenders. We're the only party on the centre-right. And we're the only ones who still believe in values like living within our means, personal responsibility, making sure that the government is not getting involved in everything so it can focus on the things it needs to look at, like securing our borders.
On the one bit of evidence, the one data point that we've got so far, which is the council elections. You lost over 670 council seats, you lost control of 16 authorities, and whatever you're doing right now, it might be working on fundraising, it might be working on uniting the party, but on your main job, which is persuading people that you're a future Prime Minister, it's proving hellishly hard.
This was always going to be the case. I mean, when I came in November and looked at what was left, I mean, the party was in a terrible state. It felt like a building that had been on fire for a long time, and there were still some pockets of fires, and I had to put them out. There was no way we were going to have a good set of results. But the analogy I give to people is like a corporate analogy, that sometimes if you have a long-term strategy, you need to do some difficult things that might not necessarily be good for your quarterly reports, but they're going to help change the organisation so that it can be a success for the long term, not the short term.
And we're several years away from a general election. You want people to get to know you better, and you've that involves, I think, understanding a bit more about your very unusual childhood for a leading British politician, and a very fascinating childhood. In preparation for this interview, I re-watched your maiden speech in Parliament, and you talked about growing up in Nigeria as an oil boom baby. There was a big oil boom in Nigeria. And there were also military coups. I think there was in 1983 and 1985, there were big changes to the system there.
Growing up in Nigeria, I saw real poverty. I experienced it. Living without electricity, doing my homework by candlelight because the state electricity board couldn't provide power. Fetching water from a borehole a mile away in heavy, rusty buckets because the nationalised water company couldn't get water out of the taps. I was unlucky enough to live under socialist policies. It is not something I would wish on anyone, and that's just one of the reasons why I am a Conservative.
Yeah. One of the main points of your maiden speech was the experience of loss. So born into a middle-class family, your dad was a doctor, your mum was a lecturer, and then your circumstances took a hit. What happened?
So, various things happened. The economy was managed by a government that didn't call itself socialist, but had lots of socialist ideals and ideas.
They controlled the economy.
Yeah, just pretty much full control of the economy, capital controls, fixed currency, etc. But the other reason was because the country itself is a low trust country. It's very multicultural, so lots of different groups. There is proper diversity in a way that many people don't recognize in the UK. Everybody looks the same, but different languages, different types of clothing, different customs. And actually, when you have people who retreat into lots of different groups, you create a low trust society. And when you have a low trust society, people think it's okay to cheat the system. And what happened to my family was that we didn't cheat the system. My parents would never take bribes. It was always about integrity. And we had a lot of people in our lives who got rich from, cheating the system, corruption. And my mum and dad said, we don't do that. People would offer my mother money to get their children into university. She was a lecturer at the best university in the country. She said no, other people did that. And so we ended up, apart from the economic crisis, just not personally enriching ourselves. And that meant that we lost quite a lot of money. And that has left me with a loathing of people who cheat the system. I hate cheats.
While Badenoch had been born in the UK after her mother travelled to the country to see a pregnancy specialist, her life growing up in Nigeria in the 1980s was a world apart from her birthplace. You talked about this in your maiden speech, to doing things that would surprise some people. So I think you've spoken about mostly it meant getting up at 5 a.m. and cutting grass endlessly.
So I was in a state boarding school. It was like Borstal. Okay, when I tell people that I went to a state boarding school, they think of Harry Potter. There were about 25 of us in a room, no running water. So, cleaning the toilets was one of the chores you had to do. Like cleaning toilets this was in one room, like 300 girls have been using. It's not pretty.
How old are you at this point?
I was 11. So I was only there for 1 year, and my parents took me out because I just came out so thin and I was not doing well. Let me put it that way. And actually, there's so many things that you forget when you live in Western society, that there are no lawnmowers. People in places where they need to cut grass, they use wooden machetes. They're very hard. They've got a blade in there, and we're all hacking these things. So everybody had a machete under their bed because you had to cut it. There was a lot of space, there's a lot of land for the school. We all had a machete, a hoe for planting things, a broom, a different type of broom for the ones we had here. We all brought our own mattresses. It's a state school, so the state doesn't provide things. You brought your own mattress, you brought your own buckets, because that's how you had your bath, and it had a rusty metal bucket, which meant that when you went to fetch the water, it was really heavy.
And Lagos, I know you moved around, but Lagos was a pretty dangerous place. You've talked about how it didn't matter that you were middle class because you could literally hear neighbours getting beaten up if they did the wrong thing. What was that about?
The being middle class did not protect you from a military government. It was easier when the actual politicians came in. But when I talked about neighbours getting beaten up, that was, actual armed robbers going in that you could hear, and that everybody would be terrified. There was just a lot of lawlessness. Yes, it was crime and disorder, and you could hear it. And if you knew something was happening, everybody would batten down the hatches. And so when I say I'm a conservative, it's not just because it's for fun. It's because I strongly believe in law and order. That's the stuff that the state needs to enforce. Strongly believe in personal responsibility. Strongly believe in a government not getting involved in all sorts of stuff that it doesn't need to, because quite often it messes things up.
By 1996, a 16-year-old Badenoch had set her heart on starting a new life in the UK and moving in with a family friend. She's referred to the British passport she secured, having been born here, as her golden ticket.
When I was in Nigeria, people used to tell me, you don't belong here. So I wasn't just the swot in the class. I was the person who would say, that person is copying notes from the other person. I was the tattletale in the class, like getting people into trouble. Because even then I hated cheating, because there I was, I wanted to be first in the class, and I've done all the work. And then there's some people who are copying notes and saying, why should they get away with it? And so I'd raise up my hand. I remember there was this extraordinary day. I was in, I must have been about 14 or 15. And I said, he's cheating. I stood up in the middle of the exam, and I stood up and said, he's cheating, he's the one that's doing it. And that boy ended up getting expelled. And I didn't get praised for it. And I was a relatively popular kid at school. And people said, why did you do that? Why would you do that? And I said, because he was doing the wrong thing. And someone said, you don't belong here, that you don't know how to behave, you don't belong here. And I've heard that all my life. You don't follow the rules, you don't do what you're supposed to, you're always sticking your head above the parapet, you're too direct, you tell the truth when you don't need to tell the truth, when you should pipe down. And I didn't belong there.
Hang on a second. So you're 14 years old, and in the middle of an exam...
14, 15.
14 or 15, you see a boy cheating. In the middle of an exam, in the middle of an exam hall, you stand up and you snitch on this kid who's cheating, who ends up getting expelled.
Yes.
No wonder you're so unpopular back at school. You sound really annoying.
I was, do you know what? The people who did that sort of thing hated it. But someone did say to me...
It was the right thing to do.
Yeah, that you were the only person who'd ever have the guts to do that. And I liked being the person who had the guts to do those things. And I think politics needs that. You need people who are going to be brave. What's the point of doing it otherwise?
Talk about being
Even
brave.
if it's doing the right thing, even if it's not popular.
No, I've got that sense. I've got that sense from you. Talking about being brave, going from Nigeria to Britain, one-way ticket, age of 16, where you said goodbye to your dad, as it were, gave you, in effect, the equivalent of his last £100.
I didn't think that he was actually going to let me go. He was less keen on it than my mother. I think maybe he thought I was too young, but he could see that I just wanted to be in London.
What was your first impression of the UK?
It didn't feel like a first impression, because I mean, how much of the UK would I remember from childhood? Very little. But how much had I absorbed from just endlessly watching BBC and, you know, Mind Your Language, and yes, my dad really loved Yes Minister.
I don't want the usual delaying tactics. This needs a sledgehammer. We must cut through the red tape.
No, you can't cut tape with a sledgehammer, Minister.
I didn't understand any of it, and I didn't know why he laughed so much, because I didn't think it was funny. But there was nothing alien about it. I just wanted to get stuck in. It just felt like, there's so much I can do here. I can get a job. And I was so excited, and I went to Argos because I was obsessed with the Argos catalogue. Do you remember what the Argos catalogue was?
You had to go in and you flick through and then you put your reference number.
It was just this, you know, magazine of wonder. And I thought, this is where I want to work, where all these beautiful things are. And Argos wouldn't hire me because I was 16, and they said, you're too young and you don't have any experience. And the only place that would take me was McDonald's.
There's a certain mythology around your time at McDonald's, as there is with a lot of politicians and their relationship with McDonald's. And I think part of that is because sometimes so-called Mac jobs are seen to be kind of ridiculous or flimsy. What did your job actually entail?
I did burgers, did fries, cleaned the floors, did washing up. But the till was my best place because I was talking to people.
So we've even spoken today about being something of a class nomad, born into a middle-class family who lost everything. That made you perhaps quite loss-averse. And you said that working at McDonald's meant you became working class. And you got a lot of stick for that. You know, the Prime Minister made light of it.
It is really great to be here at the iconic Pinewood Studios, the spiritual home of Britain's film industry. And, you know, the leader of the opposition thinks that if you do a couple of shifts in McDonald's, then you can become working class. So by that logic, if I keep coming back here, I could be the next James Bond.
What did you mean when you said that working at McDonald's meant you became working class?
Well, it meant that I had no social capital to rely on. I wasn't going to a fancy school. I didn't have any wealthy parents. I was looking after myself. No siblings, no real support system, just a roof over my head. I had to work to live. That, for me, is what being working class is. It's the lifestyle that you have. You have to work to survive. There's no personal safety net that comes with it. And I'm not surprised that the Prime Minister mocked it, because he doesn't understand what that really is like. And I found it very interesting.
He's the son of a toolmaker.
Yeah, yes.
And he would say that he was working class, and that if he were here, he'd say he understands working class better than most.
Yeah, well, it's not about what your mummy or daddy did. It's about what you did. So what I did was, what I had was an experience of knowing that if I didn't work, I would not survive.
What do you mean you wouldn't survive? Because this friend of your mum's that you were staying with didn't have a lot of money, so...
Yes, didn't have a lot of money, but she wasn't around. She had a place that I could stay in. There was a room which I had and I shared with her children, but she had her own children to look after. So I had to make sure that I looked after myself, that I had clothes, that I was eating properly. I couldn't expect to be, and I think I had this fear of being a burden on someone else.
Badenoch's passion for politics began to take hold during her first few years back in the UK. She had long considered Margaret Thatcher an icon, but her experience in education also lit a fire. When you took your A-levels, you were very influenced by what you called a kind of poverty of aspiration.
Poverty of low expectations.
The soft bigotry of low expectations.
Yes.
Soft bigotry of low expectations. And the poverty of aspiration from your teachers. And you told the Daily Mail, and I quote, "Teachers treated us differently from the white people at the college."
Yes.
And you blamed what you called left-wing teachers who were trying to be helpful.
My brother went to that same college, and this illustrates exactly the sort of thing I'm talking about. And he wanted to do business studies, and I said, well, make sure you do A-levels, not NVQs, because if you want to go to university, you need to do A-levels. And he went in, and they told him he could do NVQs. He started, and I said, no, go back and say you want to do A-levels.
There's a lot of stigma around NVQs and GNVQs at the time.
Yes, there was.
More vocational education.
Yes, exactly. And he came back and he said, Kemi, all of the kids doing NVQs are black and all of the kids doing A-levels are white. And I said, that's why I said, go and do A-levels. I don't call it racism because I think racism has to have a deliberate negativity in it, wanting to deliberately disadvantage. These people thought they were being helpful. Don't do this difficult thing. Why do you want to be a doctor? You could be a nurse. Nursing is easy, and then you'll get a job. They thought that they were being helpful. And it wasn't all the teachers, by the way. You know, I'm not putting every single person into that box. But they were not trying to get us to be the very best. They were just trying to get us to do just enough. And I don't think that is a healthy culture. I remember a conversation where I'd only ever heard of two universities, Oxford and Cambridge. So when I went to the FE college and they asked me what it was I wanted to do, I said I wanted to do medicine, I want to go to Oxford. And their teacher at the time said they don't take people like you there. And she just said it with no sort of, she didn't know anything about my background. And I didn't understand what she meant by that. But now I understand what she meant by that. Because I had more conversations around career counselling. And they said those sorts of schools, they only want posh kids, they only want this, they only want that. And I think certainly back in the 90s, I'm not sure it is still the case now, but certainly it was 30 years ago, there was an active stopping of people going there so that they wouldn't have a negative experience, which I think was quite wrong.
I'm very interested to note that you say it wasn't all the teachers.
No, it wasn't
all the teachers. Because
no.
our brilliant producer, Joel, contacted the principal of your old college, who said, I refute the allegations about low expectations for minority students. Our overriding philosophy was that we were trying to do the best for every individual student, regardless of their background. Frankly, it just sounds like rhetoric to reinforce her political narrative. I'm quite hurt by that, to be honest, because I just don't think it's true.
Well, of course, that person would say that. I don't know who that is. And what he's saying is not incorrect. They thought they were trying to do the best for everybody, but what they thought was the best was not what... I'll give you an example.
But they would say that they didn't have low expectations.
Well, I'll give you another example of low expectations. I remember getting an E in one of my modules, because we had the modular A-level system. An E was a 40%, 40 to 49%. For me, that's a fail. And I was congratulated. Well done, you got an E. And I said, but I felt, and they said, it's not a U. It's not a fail unless it's a U. And I just thought, okay, but that is what I'm talking about.
And the phrase that was popular at the time was deferred success instead of failure.
But this is something I've been saying for decades. It's not political rhetoric. And if people deny that these things happen, we're never going to fix it. I do think things are better, but there are still a lot of kids who are going to a lot of schools, and it doesn't matter whether they're not black. A lot of white working class kids have this problem where the teachers say, well, you come from the sort of family where nobody really wants to do anything. We're not going to push you. It's too hard. It's not worth it. That is not right.
After failing to get into her chosen university, Badenoch went to Sussex, where she studied computer systems engineering. There, she rebelled against what she has called North London lefties, and by the age of 25 had joined the Conservative Party. But it would be another 12 years before she was elected as an MP, during which time she completed a second degree in law and worked in IT, banking and the media. She also married banker KEMI Badenoch, with whom she would have 3 children. Once elected, a series of ministerial and cabinet positions followed before she replaced Rishi Sunak as leader in November 2024. Your dear dad never got to see you lead the Tory party. What did he make of your going into politics?
He
obviously saw you become a member of parliament.
Yes, he loved it, especially as he'd always wanted me to be a doctor. And when I didn't become a doctor, there was a whole disappointment thing. He thought I would be a doctor. I thought I would be as well. And it was right that I wasn't. It wouldn't have been the right thing for me. But he was so proud. He was so proud, and he would come and help me campaign. Certainly the first time I stood when I was sort of 29, 30, he helped me in that campaign. And when I finally won in 2017, he was around and he came to Parliament with me, and he was so proud. And he died of he had a brain tumor. And you know, when people have cancer in the brain, they're gone before they go because they're just not the same person. And so we kept having these reduced moments of lucidity. And one of the last moments that he and I had a lucid conversation, he cried because he knew he was dying. And he said, "I know that you're going to go all the way, and I know I'm not going to be there to see it." And that was really sad. That was really sad.
Incredibly sad. Let's take the temperature of where we are as a country. It's just a fact, isn't it, that we have low growth, low productivity, high debt, high spending, and high taxes in Britain today. Mm-hmm. How do we get here?
We got here through, there are many things. We got here through complacency and not noticing that the world around us was changing, and we had to move quickly. There is a view in the country that we're a rich country, and so we can just keep doing things the way we always did them. And you can see it in the way that the welfare system is creaking. We can just take as many people who can't work as are required. That's not sustainable. You can see it in the way that the asylum system, in my view, is already broken, that we can take in as many people from around the world and we can follow rules that were made for a completely different era. You can see it in terms of how the government spends money, that we can keep borrowing, it'll be fine, we won't have a debt crisis. All of that is complacency. And the world is changing. Other countries are competing better and faster. You look at the Middle East, you look at China, Singapore, young people. It's not, young people are saying that they want to go to Dubai or go to the US rather than stay here. It wasn't like that 10 years ago.
But to what extent is the fundamental challenge of your job today that you're against a big tax, big debt, big immigration, big welfare, big spending, big state Britain, but it's your party that created it, and you're having to campaign against a time when you were yourself in government?
It is not easy, but there are several things that need to be said. Firstly, we cut the deficit until COVID. COVID reset so much, put us in a much worse place. And I always tell people that had it been any other party except Conservatives, we would have been in a much worse position. COVID messed up a whole bunch of things. And we would not have been able to pay for COVID if we hadn't managed our finances so well up until then. So that's very significant. Being in government, for me, is different. It's different from what a lot of people think it is. Lots of people think cabinet is everyone sitting around a table and making the decisions together. That's not what cabinet is. The Prime Minister makes decisions and everybody else controls what's in their portfolio. So quite often when people talk about what happened during immigration or tax, having to say, well, I was the local government minister. I didn't have anything to do with what was going on. I didn't even know what was going on. I was business secretary. I was fighting different battles. I was the equalities minister. And it's because I have been in government and because I know what's wrong and I've seen the system on the inside that I know what you need to do to fix it. Most of Keir Starmer's front bench just thought the problem was us. And as soon as we went away, everything would be fine. All those greedy people would pay their taxes and people would be getting younger. We wouldn't have an aging society anymore. They were living in la-la land. They knew how to get themselves into government, but now that they're there, They don't know what to do with
Talk
it.
about an ageing society. Are we spending too big a proportion of our national money on pensioners?
We're spending a lot of our money on the demographics that we have. We need to rewire. Our society.
That's very hard to do. It's very hard to. There's very
but
few...
it has to be done.
Sure,
It has
sure,
to be done.
but where we are right now, if you face immediate decisions, and I know you're wary of getting to specific policies, but as a general principle, do you think we're spending too much money on pensioners compared to, for instance, young people?
As a general principle, we need to live within our means. And that means all of the areas where we're overspending, we need to either get under control, reduce the spending, or start working harder and earning more.
So if
the first place I would start is not pensions. The first place I would start is welfare.
So let's talk about welfare. According to some estimates, around 1 in 4 16 to 24-year-olds in this country say they have a mental disorder. Do you believe them?
I think they have a mental disorder. I don't think they all have a mental disorder.
How would you get them back into work?
So I'm not a medical expert, so it is not my expertise on exactly what we need to do to get them into work. But we should be trying to get them into work.
What do you think is going on there? Do you think that they've been encouraged to feel things that they don't actually feel? Do you think we're medicalising the ups and downs of life? What do you think is going on?
I think a lot of things. I think a lot of things are going on. I'm a big fan of a guy called Jonathan Haidt. And he's written this great book about the coddling of the American mind. And I think many of the things he writes about in there are happening in our country. Helicopter parenting, just the resilience not being built in at a younger age. I think that we are very protective. Everybody's worried about their children getting stolen or snatched or something bad happening. And we have created generations of people for whom we tell them nothing bad must happen to you. And we're going to make sure nothing bad happens. But life is not like that. And when the bad thing happens, the resilience is not there.
You've also talked a lot in the past about how in politics there are no solutions, just trade-offs.
That's correct.
And trade-offs involve potentially upsetting a lot of people. In your view, would a short-term rise in some poverty, including child poverty, be a price worth paying to get the welfare bill down and get people back into work?
So this is an interesting question.
Thank you.
Because
what's the answer?
It's an interesting question because what we define as poverty has changed. We're not talking absolute poverty here. We're talking relative poverty. And getting people into work is the best way out of poverty. So the premise of the question itself, I think, is one that I don't fully accept. We cannot be in a situation where getting people back to work is creating more poverty. It's not about taking welfare benefits away as much as it is making sure that we can actually afford what it is we're paying for and that people are, being able to earn a living, live within their means. But everybody who's getting welfare is being paid for by somebody else going out to work. We have to think about fairness.
For many in politics, one of the biggest issues of recent times is Brexit, delivered by a Conservative government. Earlier this year, I interviewed one of your predecessors, a fellow South London meritocrat in Sir John Major. In fact, it was in this room. And on Brexit, he said, "Brexit has been the most divisive thing that has happened in our party in my lifetime. I don't think it's done anything good."
It's made our country weaker, poorer, and that is emphatically not in the interests of our country.
Is he wrong?
Brexit was definitely divisive. I mean, I know people who stopped speaking to their parents and vice versa. It made a lot of socializing very difficult. It was certainly divisive. And
has it made us weaker and poorer?
I don't think it has made us weaker, but we will continue getting weaker if we don't use many of the powers that we have taken from the European Union, and if we don't get serious. Brexit, the EU was not the source of all of the UK's problems, and there was a certain cadre of people who tried to pretend that if we left the EU, everything would be fine. And, that cadre of people, exists in many different parties. If we just do this thing, everything will be fine. I see a lot of it in reform. That's not anyone who tells you that if you just do this one thing, everything will be fine. They don't have a plan. They are not being serious, and that's what's gone wrong.
You know how tight the public finances are. Mm-hmm. If there was an event, some hypothetical, theoretical event called, for instance, Brexit, which most economists had said, taking about 4 to 5% of GDP out, maybe costing a few tens of billions, would a rational government say, if this event has caused us this damage, perhaps softening, if not reversing it, in a time of very straitened public finances would be a good thing to do?
If it was true, yes, but those figures are not true. Brexit has not cost us 4 to 5% of GDP.
So the OBR and the Goldman Sachs are wrong.
It was one report from the OBR, but actually you look at a lot of the statistics and it has shown that the thing that has had a serious impact on us is COVID, it's the rise in energy prices, it's people not going to work.
But you don't
and us
dispute
taking more people in.
But you don't dispute that Brexit has so far been a net economic cost to this country.
So Brexit is still an opportunity not exploited.
But you seem to dispute even whether or not Brexit has so far been a net economic cost.
When I was business secretary, we carried out a lot of research and we found that exports had increased, for example, that we had more trading opportunities, in particular with the Asia Pacific. People were taking advantage of that. But a lot of the benefits are so diffuse that people don't feel them. But the costs, people do feel. What I'm not saying is that there has been no cost to Brexit. All change has cost. There are no solutions, as I say, there are only trade-offs. All changes have cost. What I am saying is that the thing that we were supposed to deliver has not been fully delivered. So of course people are very frustrated. And now it looks like the government wants to, in trying to tell a story about building a closer relationship with Europe, we will get many of the disadvantages that we still had, but not the advantages. And that's a worse place for me to be than where we are now.
So if the Labour Party said, going into the next election, or the Lib Dems or other people you're up against, you know what, we want to recalibrate our relationship with Europe, we want to join the customs union, what would you say?
No, because I don't think that that is what's going to create growth. Europe has the same problems we have. They have the same problems we have. This is not the solution.
Badenoch has been criticised for refusing to get into specifics about what the solutions are to Britain's challenges. Among them, ensuring cohesion in a multicultural, multi-faith society. The 2021 census revealed fewer than half of people in England and Wales now describe themselves as Christian. Badenoch has had her own battles with faith. As a rule, you may know, I don't ask people about private issues, and therefore I'm not going to ask you about your family really in detail, certainly not your children. But you have spoken publicly about losing God, and you grew up Christian. And there was, I think, a particular news story which was one of the triggers. I don't know if it was happening to you gradually or it happened suddenly, but do you mind just explaining why you had a crisis of faith and came to reject God and reject Christianity?
Yeah, well, I didn't. I rejected God, not Christianity. So I would still define myself as a cultural Christian. I went to a Church of England school, all those hymns, and being in church, it always takes me back to that. My grandfather was a reverend, and Christianity in many third world countries in Africa and Asia is a big, and Latin America is a big thing. It's a way of life. Religion was everywhere, whether you were Christian or Muslim, religion was there. It was just something that I grew up that was just always around me. But I myself was never that religious. If I could get out of going to church, I would get out of going to church. But I believed, I believed that there was a God, and I would have defined myself as a Christian apologist, always arguing with people about why there was a God. And in 2008, this story about Joseph Fritzl and his daughter, who was locked in a cellar for 24 years.
Elizabeth.
Yes, that killed it. Because to have the beliefs have core tenets, and one of the things that was core to the belief was that God does not test you more than you can bear. And this was, so whenever I was having a tough time, I did find strength in faith that I'm having a tough time, but I'm going to get through it because God does not test you beyond what you can bear. And I thought to myself, no human being should have had to experience what this woman believed. And maybe because I was very close to my father. So the idea of a father doing that to his own daughter, for me, was a level of disgust and abhorrence that I'd never experienced. And I couldn't stop reading the story. And, I read her account, how she prayed, every day to be rescued. And I thought, I was praying for all sorts of stupid things, and I was getting my prayers answered. I was praying to have good grades, my hair should grow longer, and I would pray for the bus to come on time so I wouldn't miss something. It's like, why were those prayers answered and not this woman's prayers? And it was like someone blew out a candle. And it's in an odd sort of way, now maybe getting older and just needing something to fill a space, I do find myself having a lot more of what I would call cultural Christianity. they're just wanting to protect certain things, because I think the world that we have in the UK is very much built on many Christian values, but that belief in God itself.
Questions have been raised over whether Badenoch is the right person to solve Britain's challenges and lead the Conservatives into the next election. And her combative style of leadership has come under scrutiny.
I remember us sitting on that side of the house and they were demanding that we spend more and more and more money. Thank God it was Conservatives who were there under COVID. Labour would have bankrupted the country.
Why do you think there's been so much focus on your personality and criticism that you're too abrasive? You talked a little bit earlier in this interview about how you were on the front foot as a young person, getting written off and standing your ground. But a lot of the commentary around you has focused on this idea that you're difficult or you're kamikaze. What do you make of that?
What it is that I'm very direct. And
Too direct?
Yes. And I don't think, as a politician, I think you need to be very direct. I don't think you can be too direct. And I'm also very honest. And for many people, that's jarring. Did you need to say that? Why did you say it in that way? But I got sick of, being given lines to read on the news that just sounded like a robot. And I thought, no, I'm not going to speak like that. I'm going to speak like a normal human being. And that's helped, that's actually helped me. But the other thing is that I don't like a fight, but I won't run away from a fight. If I'm fighting for someone, I'm fighting for people probably who can't fight for themselves. I'm fighting for a principle or an idea.
Do you want to be liked?
Sorry?
Do you want to be liked?
I want to be respected more than liked. I think politicians who try to be liked end up doing things that they shouldn't do. If you want to be liked, go and work for a charity or in a library. Politics is about taking difficult decisions. That's why we're elected. Otherwise, you could leave everything to civil servants.
But today, being liked is arguably more important than ever when it comes to dealing with the West's most powerful and unpredictable leader. Sir Keir Starmer very recently was described by Donald Trump as someone that he likes very much, even though he's a liberal. I mean, hasn't Keir Starmer played it rather well with Donald Trump?
Well, we have a worse trade relationship with the US now than we did in March. It's better than what we had in April.
It's also the first deal that the US did with any country.
Yeah, but just being first, if it's not a good deal, so what if you're first? Liz Truss signed a tariff deal with the US on steel and other things. A tariff deal is not a trade deal. A fully comprehensive free trade agreement covers everything, financial services, and this was a small tariff deal to deal with what Donald Trump had done. So it was a reactive thing. And whenever Labour negotiates, Britain loses, in my view. Whether it's with the Chagos Islands, whether it's with the unions, whenever they negotiate, the country is in a worse position. So I'm glad that he has a good relationship with Donald Trump, but what I care about is whether Britain is in a better place, and right now we're not.
What have you learned from the MAGA movement? I know you had dinner with J.D. Vance not such a long time ago in Washington. What do you see of Trump and MAGA that makes you think, I want some of that over here? I should just preempt that by saying Nigel Farage said to me the day after the local elections, which Reform did very well I spoke to him on the Today programme, and he said, I want a Doge in every council. Do you?
I want every council to make sure that it's spending your money properly. A Doge in every council is something that the council should be doing already. If they're not, they're making a mess. But these gimmicks are not the same thing as doing things properly. And you talked about what happened after the local elections. We had an awful result for all the reasons that I talked about before. Reform had a good result. But being a repository for disenchantment is not going to solve things. They are a repository for disenchantment. We have to be a beacon of hope. I want to offer people hope and opportunity, that we're doing something amazing. We're taking our time. This is the North Star. This is where we are going. So if there is something that I would take from a lot of the movements that people are going to, it is being able to offer hope that things are going to be better. That has to be a message that Conservatives deliver. We've sounded very pessimistic, and that's exacerbated by opposition, because the job is to criticise, more or less what the government is doing. But we've got to be seen as a party of optimism and opportunity. That is who we are. If we're not that, then we die.
Where does your confidence that you've got time come from? Your party's got something of a reputation, something of a history of regicide, or certainly getting rid of leaders that they run out of patience with. And there are lots of people, including in your party, who say, hang on a second, Kemi, you look at the polls, you're falling. You look at your personal approval ratings, it's showing no sign of imminent electoral triumph. And the fundamental fact of your time as leader of the Tory party is that you're dealing with a massive fracture on the right of politics, which your heroine, Margaret Thatcher, didn't have to deal with. Why are you so confident you've got time?
Well, Margaret Thatcher did have a similar problem.
She contained them, the wets and the dries, the Europhiles and the
Not within the
Europhobes.
party. She did have an external problem. And it's fascinating. I've been reading this book, it's just contemporaneous. And it's about how Jeremy Thorpe, they were so worried about. He was taking Tory party donors. He was this posh, tall man who looked like what a Conservative Party leader should do. Margaret was not going to be able to deal with him. So people have had this version of events before. But this complaint that you've described, I mean, I had this 2 weeks in. The last oppositions have been 14 years, 13 years, 18 years. And 2 weeks after, people said, oh, this isn't going to work. A lot of people will say this because they don't want it to work. I know that this can and will work. Because
how do you know that?
Because there is no other way we do this unless we explain what we got wrong, win back the public trust, and do not repeat the mistakes we made of making promises that we couldn't deliver. In opposition, you have to show that you've changed. The process of change is not quick, and it is always painful. Anyone who thinks change is going to be an overnight thing and it's going to be easy is not serious.
See, that's the systems engineer analysing the problem. But the issue, the fact is that you've got a party that's come out of nowhere. It's a reformed version of the Brexit and UKIP party, and they're on 30% in some polls. And you might say it takes time, but where's the evidence that your approach is going to work?
This needs patience. If we're going to be lurching left, right, and centre at every single poll or everything that happens in the news, we will end up going round in circles. I know that the leader of the opposition's job gets harder before it gets easier. People try and knock you off your stride. It's happened to every leader of the opposition. Oh, you're not going to win. This isn't going to work. But I am somebody who people have always tried to write off, and I have always succeeded. And I believe that I can do that with the Conservative Party.
I've got some quick-fire questions. Maximum 10 words, minimum 1. What time do you wake up in the morning?
5:45.
Oh, so you can listen to today's programme. What time do you go to bed?
I don't do this. Heart FM.
Heart FM?
Yes.
Jamie Theakston and Amanda Holden.
That is correct. Although, to be honest, right now, I don't even really listen to radio. I have children running around. But 5:45 is standard wake-up time.
What time do you go to bed?
Midnight.
Scrolling on Instagram. What do you do to keep fit?
That is sometimes true. Treadmill and gym.
Favourite meal?
Spaghetti bolognese.
Greatest achievement in politics so far?
Which one to pick? It's not becoming leader of the opposition. It's what you do with it. I would say getting the postmaster's convictions overturned. I think that was the right thing to do for a lot of people. Stopping Scotland from bringing in self-identification. Absolutely. And getting a report out that showed that Britain is not a racist country and that actually white working class boys suffer more disadvantage in many circumstances, getting the truth out about what was going on race. Those are 3 things I'm proud of.
What's your guilty pleasure?
Taking my shoes off. Being barefoot.
What makes a good leader?
What makes a good leader is honesty, grit, determination, conviction.
What's your favourite meal from McDonald's?
Bacon and egg McMuffin.
KEMI Badenoch, thank you so much.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you very, very much indeed.